The Jays win, the Jets win, and Jonathan Toews gets his first as a Winnipeg Jet all in the same night. How could it be better for Winnipeg Jets fans the world over?
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, there is a lot to talk about. The Jets just beat the Calgary Flames 2-1, but you probably don't care. You are probably watching Toronto win against Seattle in the ALCS. The Blue Jays are World Series bound. Congrats to all of you who are Jays fans. As an Orioles fan, it is a little painful to be the last AL East team to have a World Series berth here in the last decade or so, but hey, while you're here, enjoy it, Jays fans. Please, for the love of all that is good and holy, let's hope the Dodgers lose. We cannot watch another Dodgers World Series. But you're here for Jets hockey, and there's a lot to talk about, right? This game against Calgary did not quite go the way I expected. Of course, I opened my big mouth and say the Jets had a straightforward shot here, and instead the game was a lot closer, and it required Winnipeg to really be getting some star performances from everyone, including Hellebuyck, Scheifele, etc., you name it. The Jet stars really had to show out in some big moments. We'll chat about that, some early penalty concerns, and also do a little bit of a rookie rotation review for Brad Lambert's season debut. Later this week, we'll go back and talk about Ford and Triberkov as well. But of course, before we dive into all of this, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, Jets, Flames, 2-1 victory. This game, I think, was in a lot of ways secondary to what most people were watching on a Monday evening, right? Obviously, it's a later start time, and it's also competing with the Toronto Blue Jays. But if you actually did watch this game, like me, you probably saw a couple of things stand out. For one, the Flames gave the Jets absolute heck. I probably jinxed it a little bit. I thought that this game would be a little bit on the easier side for Winnipeg. Didn't go that way at all. And a part of it was not just because, Calgary outplayed Winnipeg at 5v5. The Jets ended up getting themselves into some real penalty trouble. We'll talk about this because it's a bit of a trend with this team, and there could be some very big underlying reasons as to why Winnipeg finds itself on the PK about 4.5 times per game. But, we'll save that for a little bit. In this one, the Jets had to kill off 5 penalties, and it just really disrupted the flow of 5v5 play. When this happens, your special teams units will eat up certain amounts of time. You have to juggle your lines around. And the Jets just really couldn't get a very good foothold in this game that felt normal, right? And that's going to happen from time to time. Amidst all of that, I think we continue to see Connor Hellebuyck being really amazing. This game from him, I thought he really just put on a spectacular show. The only blemish was a Rasmus Andersson shot that I think it was Lomberg who was in front of him, sort of screened him. He didn't see the point shot until it was too late. Kind of went through his 7-hole. Not exactly the happiest goal I'm sure he's ever conceded, but just one of those things where, it is what it is, right? The Jets, frankly, needed to be better. Winnipeg was struggling to clear the defensive zone, and it squeaked through. But then, the Jets got plenty of power plays themselves. They also got 5 opportunities, and they got really close on quite a few of the chances. Just Dustin Wolf at the other end really seems to have Winnipeg's number, and honestly, in general, was just a great goalie, man. If you've watched Wolf before, you know that he's fast, he's athletic, and I thought in this game, he made it really hard to get to the loose pucks. I felt like he smothered it very quickly. I felt like the Jets could not pounce on rebounds. a little bit of a frustrating evening trying to get those second chance opportunities. And when they did finally appear, the Jets had trouble capitalizing. The Flames really sold out the block shots. Winnipeg was a little unlucky. Just one of those nights where, you're scrapping for every opportunity and it gets to be a little bit much. But of course, finally, the Jets did get a bit of a breakthrough. Jonathan Toews deflected a long distance point shot from the middle of the ice, ended up getting it right past Wolf. Beautiful tip. Exactly what you want to see from Toews on the second unit. And just like that, the Jets tied it. And then, Mark Scheifele, who I have kept saying really can't be stopped, again proves that he cannot be stopped. The top line had this breakout towards the end of the game, just a couple minutes left in regulation. And as soon as I saw Scheifele and Connor kind of get the inside step on the neutral zone, I'm like, you know what? This might be it. I just had the sense when you see these two start to really speed up and get into that quick stride, you're like, they're about to beat this defender and it's going to be a goal. And even with that expectation in mind, it was still a pitch perfect pass behind the defender. Connor, wraps it perfectly. Scheifele does exactly what Scheifele does, deposits the puck right past Wolf. It's a beautiful 2-1 lead, and the Jets ended up surviving a late penalty to see this one out, right? So a big win on the road, probably a little more arduous than I expected. I thought this was not going to be the hardest game of the week. Instead, though, the Flames put up a pretty big fight. And I think for the Jets, the blue line continues to be a bit of a problem. The only group that's not an issue here really are a lot of the top units, right? The top line for the Jets has been pretty good. Velarde maybe a little quieter. I want to talk about him maybe on a separate episode just because I feel like there may need to be a change a little bit with where he's playing in this unit. But the Jets' top D pairing, you got to give Morrissey and DeMello their roses. They have been phenomenal. This Jets' second and third pairing, a little more topsy-turvy. I thought Pionk was fine in this game, generally speaking. Stanley had some solid moments too. But you did notice a lot of those defensive issues once it was, below the goal line for Winnipeg, right? Once anyone kind of got behind Hellebuck, it was a real mess. And there were a lot of turnovers and stuff, not just from the second pairing, but also from Shen and Fleury, who really struggled. Not the best night for the Jets defense. And I think a lot of Flames opportunities came off of those D-zone turnovers that somehow Hellebuck was just wise to anyways and managed to really bail Winnipeg out. So, obviously during this stretch, right, the Jets are just trying to survive. And that's exactly what they did. It wasn't pretty. I have some real quibbles with how this game kind of ended and how the Jets pulled it out. But at the end of the day, these are all points that you'll take no matter what. You got to bank them while you can. Even when the Jets are healthy, points will never come easily. And I think this game was a bit of a reminder that the Jets still have a lot of work to do. The past few wins haven't exactly been the cleanest. I think the Flyers game was probably the best. This one was, again, kind of sloppy. I think the Jets probably were a little fortunate, but 2 points is 2 points. And at the end of the day, that's all you can take, right? You just got to move on and kind of make sure that, when you see the Flames again later this week, you are a little cleaner with the puck. So the nice thing is the Jets will be home for that game. Don't have to worry about the road trip so much where we were in hostile territory in Calgary. But amidst all of that, I did mention the Jets have had some penalty troubles, right? I want to talk about that specifically because the penalty stuff has become a bit of a bigger issue than I expected. We'll chat about why in just a little bit. But before we do, wanted to shout out our friends and partners that I mentioned earlier at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put $5 down, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're somebody who loves following the stats, whether it's QBR or passer rating, any of the fun stuff. Maybe you're somebody who even likes sacks or pressures. No matter what it is that you're into, this can be your competitive advantage to win with FanDuel. Or if you're maybe into higher level stuff, maybe you know who's going to win upcoming weekend matchups. Maybe you have a sense of who might even win the MVP trophy or, most of all, the Lombardi trophy. If you're a new user, this is your chance to make your Sundays a lot more fun. Drop $5 down, and if your bet wins, you could get $300 in bonus bets to keep the winning going. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. While I have your attention, I also wanted to shout out our friends and partners at Rugiet. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired. It happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor who's 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments, always discreet. And if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. Visit rugiet.com/lockedonnhl to get 15% off your order. That's rugiet.com/lockedonnhl, and don't forget to use our code LOCKEDONNHL so they know we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we're chatting a little bit about the Jets and some recent trends that we've seen from the first few games of the season. Obviously, Winnipeg is down quite a few skaters right now. Not really shocking that, the team may have some issues. They've managed a 5-1 record so far, which is pretty great. How they've arrived at 5-1, you might have a couple of questions and concerns. Look, I'm going to be blunt, right? The Jets are not playing particularly great hockey, but we knew that kind of coming into this. They just have to survive. That's the biggest thing. If they play really good hockey in any of these games, you are thrilled. If they can continue to sort of outperform their talent or maybe some of the injuries, you're probably feeling pretty good about that, right? It is what it is. You're just not going to have a perfect run. Unfortunately for the Jets, they have maybe put themselves at a slight disadvantage on the back end. And I've mentioned Colin Miller before, probably needing to come in. Now, look, I get the whole rotation thing, and I've seen arguments for this when it comes to the blue line. But the reality is the Jets kind of know what Hayden Fleury and Logan Stanley are. They also know what Luke Shen is. At this point, there's not really a lot of benefit to playing them. And I think when it comes to a guy like Colin Miller, the Jets, again, just don't trust him. They don't think that he can do PK stuff. They don't see him as defensively reliable. And so for all these reasons, they like the big physical and maybe even fast skating in Fleury's case, blue liners, which don't really fit Miller's profile. And with all of that, it just puts the Jets in a bit of a tougher spot because the defense right now is having trouble getting the puck up the ice and clearing the D zone. Not really shocking. You see a lot of turnovers. You see some misplays here and there, some bubbling around in the D zone. It happens, right? It is what it is. It wouldn't be an issue if it was occasional, but it's just a constant thing. And because the Jets forwards don't exactly have the biggest amount of team speed in terms of skating up and down the lineup, what you end up seeing is that the Jets get themselves in trouble and have to take a lot of penalties. Winnipeg, through 6 games, is averaging 4.5 penalties already, which is 27 penalties in 6 games. The PK percentage has been almost perfect, like 96-ish percent, almost 97%. Obviously, that's crazy for a team like this, which traditionally not only gives up a fair few penalties, but also concedes power play goals against. So far, that's not really been an issue, and it's partly from a couple of different things, right? The PK, I think, is more aggressive. That has made it harder for opposing shooters to attack that slot area. We're also playing a lot of teams that don't have very good power plays. You start getting towards the Utahs and, maybe some of the teams like Colorado, and I think you realize that's going to be a little bit of a different story. But while you have these teams that don't have a lot of elite 5v4 tactics, this is your chance to sort of get some practice in, get those PK reps in, and try and see if the whole pressure thing is helpful. But I think the bigger storyline is that the Jets keep taking these penalties. Some of the calls in the Flames game I didn't love. I'm going to be honest. I think there were probably one or two penalties where I was like, that's a really ticky-tacky call, not a real penalty. I thought the reffing was a little heavy-handed on some stuff. So, I don't want to read too much into that game specifically, but I think there's a broader trend of the Jets having issues with some stick penalties and just getting themselves in trouble when the opposing skater is blowing by them. Because Winnipeg doesn't, again, have that elite speed to match up against some of these rush counters and stuff, they get themselves caught in some awkward situations, and it leads to them taking penalties. I think Miller needs to come in to at least help alleviate that very slightly. I don't know if he's actually going to reduce the number of penalties. He's taken a bad one himself to start the season. But at this point, right, you might as well see if you can do something. Hellebuck and Comrie have already been pretty besieged on the PK, and it's just a few games early into the season. You don't really want that to become a trend. It's a little bit like blocking shots. Somebody years ago described blocking shots as a bit like killing rats. It's okay if you're doing it a couple of times, but if you're doing it a lot, it means that there might be deeper issues. You've got an infestation of some sort, and that's kind of where the Jets are with this PK. Yes, it's performing as, I think, the number one PK in the league, if not number two. But, that PK percentage is very volatile and not something that I think you want to ride on throughout the whole season. And, the other problem is when you're on the PK, that's valuable 5v5 time that you're giving up. That's where I think the Jets can do more work against these lesser teams at even strength. If you're on the PK constantly, it takes away from your ability to get into the game flow. You can't call upon your rotations as neatly as you'd like to. So, yeah, for a lot of reasons, we know penalties are just not fun to take. Thankfully, the Jets did draw a couple of cheeky little power plays themselves, so it's not like it was all bad for the special teams. But I think if you're looking at this going forward, the Jets probably are a little worried about how some of the game flow has gone. I think this team can certainly survive, and they've done a good job of it so far, but the amount of power plays that they're giving up to opponents, it's too many. 4.5 per game is pretty crazy. And I think it just speaks to the fact that as it is right now, Winnipeg is really hanging on and struggling to contain a lot of their opponents who are faster than them in those corners and on those rush counters where, opponents are just able to get the inside step. The Jets have had to maybe be a little more desperate in some of their plays. Some of those opportunities get themselves into a little bit of trouble. They've also just had some plain discipline and stick issues. Some of it a little unlucky, some of it from guys who probably know better. So, just don't make it harder on yourself. You're already down, 3 of your most important skaters, including one of your arguably top 5 players on the team in Sandberg. You're going to have a hard time. Try and see if you can't make life a little bit easier on yourself as much as possible. It's not going to be perfect, and I think for Winnipeg, again, like I said, the main focus is just surviving at this point, which they've done a good job of through 6 games. But I think at some point, this power play stuff that they keep conceding is going to bite them in the butt. And I think you want to set good habits earlier before you start making it into the second half of the season and into your big playoff push. The Jets are going to be thinking about securing that playoff seeding pretty early here, especially as we're almost to November. I know it's crazy to say, but we are getting closer and closer to American Thanksgiving. It's a little over a month from now, so the Jets do have plenty of time and plenty of games to sort things out, get healthier. Obviously, Perfetti is apparently back on track to come back a little bit earlier than expected, so that's great. Sandberg's still healing. He's got a broken bone from what I understand, so that could be a little bit trickier. But Lowry should be back in the next couple weeks. That's pretty awesome news. A lot of this stuff will improve over time, but while the Jets are still trying to get through these next few weeks, it might be a little bit rough. And if you can bring in maybe a Colin Miller or somebody who can just help get the puck up the ice faster, you might save yourself a little bit of stress and ease up the workload on a couple of guys who have already had to do a lot of heavy lifting. So not to be like too alarmist, but yeah, 4.5 penalties per game, probably not what you want to be doing to start the season. But curious to know your thoughts there. Are you happy with the PK? Are you worried that the Jets have already taken so many penalties early into the season? Drop your thoughts in comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. I also want to talk a little bit about Brad Lambert's season debut He didn't play a lot, just a little over 10 minutes, but I had some interesting insights from what I saw and some suggestions for how to make the most of him going forward. Before we chat about that, though, thought you should hear about our friends and partners at Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us can't name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all in one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch helps you organize your accounts by itemizing your spending, and it gets a better handle on your investments. So you can see if your portfolio and profile are doing well, if you need to make some adjustments, or maybe you're a little bit more of a granular user, right? You just want to figure out if you're spending too much on your streaming services. Monarch is here to help, and if you've got a partner or spouse, you can even have shared accounts so you're always on the same financial page. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks for you. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us tonight's episode as we're just wrapping up really quickly with some thoughts on Cole Perfetti, or not Cole Perfetti, another young gun, Brad Lambert's first game of the season. Obviously, Lambert has been a guy that I think a lot of us have talked about for the past couple of years. There's been a fair bit of excitement about Lambert. Also, a little bit of skepticism. And I think when you come to Brad's game and you look at last year's performance, some of the cosmetic issues he had before he got drafted, and then his rookie year with Winnipeg, and then last season, there's just a lot to try and figure out. How much is his recent struggles attributed to team issues? How much are his issues? It's a little harder to say. But I think what we saw in tonight's game was promising. Lambert had a couple of really cool plays, one of which was a somewhat risky but well-executed pass to Logan Stanley as a trailer option. Stanley ended up having a scoring opportunity off of that. Brad also had a close-in shot that ended up getting a bit of a face-off inside the offensive zone. And then later in the game, I thought he made a smart play to get the puck to Cole Koepke for a zone exit that ended up leading a neutral zone breakout, and the Jets were able to get a line change. They'd been spending a fair bit of ice time in their own D zone up until that point, so having Lambert able to do that was nice. He also had a wraparound opportunity a little bit before that, and that was really the most of what we saw out of him this game. I think the big thing is that, because of all the disruptions to the 5v5 play, some of the shifts that Lambert might have had kind of went away. And because the game score was so close, Arniel often doesn't trust a kid like Lambert to handle these these high intensity minutes. And I wouldn't say that Lambert is defensively responsible in the usual sense. Sometimes in the D zone, he's a little passive, and you'll see that from game to game. But I think the biggest thing that I noticed with him was, first off, his speed, right? He was like the first guy up the ice almost every time. And that breakout pace and speed sometimes gets him into trouble when maybe his line mates aren't on the same page and he's looking for a breakout pass, like a jailbreak opportunity. Maybe he's cheating a little bit for offense, and his teammates aren't really on the same page, and it kind of leads to a messy situation. That didn't happen in this game. I've seen it happen before, but I think the promising stuff here, where his ability to get up the ice quickly and spring those counters, is just immediately apparent. If you give him skill to work with, I think Lambert will actually shine. I've got a lot of confidence in his ability to be a really creative force. And what I liked from him tonight was that in the few chances that he had to get the puck towards the net, he did. He immediately wanted to give the puck either to a close-in line mate who could shoot and get a better scoring chance, or he took it himself. And the chances that he had were pretty decent. Now, again, right, like some of the plays and stuff, there weren't really many big opportunities for him to connect, but I thought he had one chance or two chances in this game where there was a pretty close moment where he almost got an assist. So overall, I was pretty happy with this game. Was it earth-shattering, needle-moving? Probably not. But again, playing 10-ish minutes, your first game of the season, after spending a couple games with the Moose where Manitoba's really not been very good and he's kind of struggled to find some rhythm, I thought this was probably as promising as it gets. Between him, Chibrikov, and Ford, I don't know that any single player has done anything crazy to the level of earning a spot. If I had to guess, Ford is probably going to be the player who stays up. That's just my guess right now. Ford, I thought, looked like a nice fit for the fourth line. And given how the Jets tend to want to use their youth, it wouldn't shock me if that's the route that they go with. But for Lambert's first game in this rotation, I thought he had a nice outing. I thought in a game where there just weren't that many chances for him to actually take the ice and shine, in the few chances he got, he put on some impressive little displays, and I would really like to see him alongside Toews. JT needs somebody who's not Tanner Pearson. All due respect to Pearson, I think he's had a good start to the season. I think in a depth role, he has excelled. In the role that the Jets occasionally ask of him, where he's alongside Toews or whatever, I don't really care for that deployment schedule. I don't think it works for that line. I don't think it works for Toews. And I think you need to get somebody with more transition ability up there. Because, obviously, Pearson's hands and brain still work, perfectly. They're very sharp. But the skating legs, especially late in games, have not been as effective. And yes, Lambert's going to have moments where you probably wished he made a different decision, but to some degree, you're just going to have to live with at least a couple of the warts until he can start to get more and more comfortable at this level. But he probably won't have enough time for that this trip. I would expect him to cycle out in a couple of games here. Tonight was probably his first of 2 to 3 games max before we see the rotation change again. I don't know, right? I think Lambert internally has some expectations from the Jets front office to try and put things together. They really do need a skater like him to hit big. I don't know if that would necessarily happen this season, but I do think Lambert has all the tools to be an effective middle to top 6 scorer. I just need to see him do it on a consistent level alongside some good skilled line mates. This scenario with the roster right now isn't entirely suited to the way that he works, but like Perfetti, Cole changed his game a good bit and became a really effective forechecker. Maybe Lambert can find a way to adapt to what the Jets need from him going forward. That's the hallmark of a really talented player, and hopefully Brad fits that mold. But curious to know what you thought of his first game. Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. Tomorrow, I'll probably talk a little bit about either Ford or Chibrikov, maybe both, and also talk a little bit about the upcoming opponents for this weekend. We have a doubleheader, obviously towards the end of the week on Thursday and Friday, so should be a good time for the Jets, but hopefully, that first game against Seattle could be a little bit of a doozy. But like I said, that's all the time that we have for tonight. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day. Every day, we'll see you back here tomorrow, so as always, have a great night, and go Jets go.